This is Kevin Crouch with Ellis County Weather. This Wild Weather Wednesday series won't always be me telling you the story of a wild weather event. Sometimes I'm going to let others do the storytelling and do interviews with people who have done interesting jobs and held interesting positions and been in interesting situations surrounding weather. In this case, I'm talking to Warren Faidley, a photojournalist and storm chaser who's been at it since about the mid 1980s and has a lot of knowledge and wisdom to share when it comes to weather and a fair amount of really interesting stories too. If you want to go to stormchaser.com to learn more about his work, I definitely encourage you to do so. But for now, here is my interview with famed photojournalist and legendary storm chaser, Warren Faidley.
Well, Mr. Faidley, it is a pleasure to talk to you today, and it's good to see you. I know that you're not putting out as much content out there, at least as it seemed back when I was grabbing every video clip I could find of your work and that kind of thing. So it's good to see you. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. Yeah, I took a break there. Social media, I was a little bit slow to get caught up with that. And there was, of course, the big transition between digital cameras and old film cameras. And I was busy in that transition period, and also with stock photography. That was changing too, from slides to digital files. And that kind of overlapped the new social media age. So I was a little slow there to get caught up. But now I'm doing a lot more things like interviews and things like that.
Awesome. Yeah, my cousin was big in photography, and she was just getting really comfortable with straight up old fashioned film photography when everything started to change. So she learned kind of the old school way of doing things. And right when she really got solid, everything flipped and changed around. So I had a conversation with her recently about that. And I can only imagine what it would be like to have to go through that whole shift when it's muscle memory, doing all these things. So for one, if you could just kind of tell us how you got started in doing this, and what made you so fascinated, not only with photojournalism, but, specifically photography with storms and that kind of thing.
Well, I had always been interested in storms since I was born, if it's possible, because I was born in Topeka, Kansas, May 11th, right in the middle of tornado season. Who knows? There may have been sirens going off or people talking about it, and I don't even remember it.
Right.
And of course, the big tornado went through Topeka just a few years after we left. And as fate would have it, my father, who was a military contractor, moved to Mobile, Alabama, which was a big hurricane alley. So I lived there for a few hours and a few years. And then, of course, he moved to Tucson, Arizona, which is one of the big lightning and monsoon capitals of the world. So by the time I was in my teens, I had been exposed to a lot of different severe weather. So I guess the mold was cast that that's what I was going to do. And photojournalism was fun, but it didn't quite offer the adventure, travel, and excitement I wanted. I wanted this big treasure. I wanted to find something big in photography. And little by little, I realized storms might offer that. At the time, there was no one else shooting storms, just storms. There were other photographers that would go out and shoot it if there was a flood or something that was newsworthy, but no one was doing it for a living. So I thought, hey, this is an open door. It's something new. No one's captured the market. And I just went full force. Once I got into it, there was no looking back. Of course, went from lightning here in Arizona to the plains, and then onward to the Gulf and East Coast for hurricanes.
Very cool. And you're living in Arizona now, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I live here in Tucson.
Yeah. So you're right in the middle of lightning heaven out there.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the storm that's going to be hitting the plains in the east went through this morning when I was actually taking the trash cans in. It was kind of ironic. I'm sitting out there. Here comes the front through, and I'm thinking, boy, that thing's going to be raising heck here in about 48 hours.
Yeah, I remember a clip. I was telling you before we started that I used to watch all your clips and documentaries and that kind of thing. But there's one where you're in a hotel room, I think in Amarillo, and you're kind of filming like your process of getting the day started, and then lightning strikes right outside the motel room, and you're noting you can smell the ozone and everything, and I can relate to one time I was still a kid, and walking from one side of the living room to the other, lightning flashes, and then the thunder the boom was so impactful, it knocked me off my feet. I was kind of mid stride, threw off my balance. So to photograph something so awesome yet so obviously powerful, has to be a rush in and of itself.
Yeah, lightning, a lot of people think, well, you got hurricanes, but with tornadoes or hurricanes, you can see those. You can get as close as you want most of the time, unless something surprises you. With lightning, you're really it's like Russian roulette when it comes to what could happen to you. You're just out there set up, looking forward, thinking, well, it'll probably hit here or there. And a lot of times it hits a lot closer than you think. So it can be quite frightening. And you're right, that flash and that thunder, when it happens all at once, it is absolutely just, there's something about it just makes you jump out of your skin.
You noted Mobile, Alabama being a haven for hurricanes, that kind of thing. And this is more of really a question for me. And I know some of the viewers have kind of mentioned this to me too, but it seems to me like in the last several years, kind of the conventional wisdom for a long time was that Tornado Alley, like you said, is, Kansas, Oklahoma, the Plain States, right? So, but over the past few years, it seems like the Deep South, so-called Dixie Alley, has been getting a lot more tornado activity. I mean, obviously 2011 was the historic outbreak, but it just seems like I feel like I'm covering fewer tornadoes in North Texas here, and James Spann over in Alabama is working a lot harder. So have you kind of noticed that from your perspective, that it seems like there's a focus kind of shifting there, or is that just kind of a perception thing?
I think it's two things. One is there's a lot more chasers out covering these events now in the East. They used not to chase there. One reason is because of drones. They're able to raise these drones above the tree lines and actually get a shot, which you couldn't do before. You were at the mercy of if you could find an open area. I think that's part of it, but we've also seen the dry line, and living in Texas, everybody knows what the dry line is. Some people think it's because of global warming. We've seen a shift of that dry line further east. So a lot of the storms are developing further east, and when they mature, they're east of the traditional tornado alley in the Dallas area. Unfortunately, Oklahoma City still seems to be right in that target area, but we're seeing storms form a lot more to the east while the drought's going on. And of course that relates, you could say, well, like the fires in California, you're having drought there and it's extending into the west, and therefore the dry line's pushing out a little further east. And that is true. If you look at some of the statistics in recent years, there seems to be an eastern shift.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. And that's something that I'm going to be kind of exploring a little bit too, because it's something that people ask me, and I tell them I really don't have that great an explanation, but it just, as somebody who's watched weather for a long time, there definitely seemed to be a little bit of a pattern shift there. Now, social media, you talk about how there's a lot more chasers, and social media has really changed storm chasing in general. I mean, you look at guys like Reed Timmer who are broadcasting live. You've got Ryan Hall who kind of works with him as well. I mean, it's changed the way I do things, because I harness social media, use it to kind of create a countywide model for broadcasting and that kind of thing. And so how has social media impacted the way that you do things? You're one of the, I would argue, one of the, probably greatest photojournalists of our time, as far as doing things that old-fashioned way. And you talked a little bit about how you kind of were dealing with that transition of the old way to the new way. So how has social media changed what you do, or has it, have you kind of tried to resist that, or what, how has that impacted your work?
Well, when I started, I had to chase storms in order to make a living as a stock photographer. I did very well back in those days before everybody had a camera and was on social media giving stuff away. So I had to chase, I had to be on the right storms. Nowadays, with all the social media chasers, and so many people posting images for free, that market really no longer exists. So things have changed. I think when social media first came out, it was kind of a, hey, I'm going to up you one. I'm going to get as close as I can to this tornado. You're not going to beat me. I'm going to drive right into it. I think a lot of those guys who were chasing 10, 15 years ago in social media really came on the scene. A lot of that, they matured. And I'm glad to see that they've matured now to where the presentations are professional. The information they're giving out is very helpful. When they're out spotting, they're giving great information. Some of them are doing scientific work. So I think social media has really come of age, and it has matured to the point now where I think it's a lot more viable than, say, it was when it first started, and it was just kind of a Wild West show.
I mean, it kind of still feels that way sometimes, but
Yeah.
that's a whole other conversation. So do you have any chase stories from the North Texas area? I know that there's a broad area that you've covered, but are there any kind of Dallas Fort Worth area particular stories you have that you tell?
Well, I don't chase in that area too much, and the reason is not because I don't like the people, or I don't like chasing there.
Right.
It's nothing personal, but it's because of just the density and the difficulty it is to get around and chase in that area. It's the same thing now with Oklahoma City, even Wichita to some degree. A lot of chasers are avoiding those areas. Any areas where you have a lot of roads, road construction, heavily populated areas, especially on the big high risk days. We saw what happened in El Reno, unfortunately, when the roads got clogged and there were so many chasers. It was out of control. I'm really surprised more people weren't killed in that event just from the clogged roads in that area. So a lot of chasers will no longer go into those areas. They will find either another place to chase, or they'll stay just outside of those areas. So it's been many years since I've even tried to venture into the larger metropolitan areas.
That's interesting. Yeah. And it's anytime that anyone tells me I want to go spot storms or I want to go chase storms, that kind of thing, I always tell them, the 4-way rule, or whatever different people call it, where you need 4 directions to get out of there. Because I mean, you have so many, and especially with social media, there's so many thrill-seeking chasers that it's hard for first responders to get where they need to go. It's hard for chasers to get out if they need to.
Yeah.
So
that's the negative side of social media. And we did talk about the positive side, how it's matured. I do still think there's people who just want to go out kind of in a jackass style way. And I don't think their mind's in the right place of what they want to do. They want to go out and get real close or emulate some of the stuff they see. It's not that they're doing that. The problem is that they just don't have the experience. And besides clogging the roads up, they're doing very dangerous things. And I'm really kind of surprised we're not seeing the fatality rates of those amateurs go up. There haven't been a few of them killed and injured, but I think if we start seeing these big intense storms in the major city areas, and you get a lot of people going to these areas, you will see some unfortunate tragic event, for example, where there's so many cars, it blocks the road, which is one of my biggest worries. When you have people doing crazy stuff, they'll end up causing an accident and blocking a road and no one can escape. I think that's one of the biggest fears of having people out there that are just out there for the thrill, and there's absolutely no other purpose to be out there.
So there's plenty of record of the work that you've done in years past, the photography that you've done. Obviously, one of those was on the poster of Twister, which is fantastic. It's one of those things I think people don't realize how much they've seen your photography until it's pointed out that so many of these different images used in textbooks and different promotional items and different things are yours, and usually it's the best you see out there. So out of all of that, with all the kind of changes that have gone on, and the just the evolution of weather content overall, what are you doing these days kind of in this new environment? Are you still doing some photography? Are you doing more of, like you said, kind of the interviews and that kind of thing? What does the world of Warren Faidley look like these days?
Spend a lot of time in bars by myself. No, just kidding. No, I still do almost everything I did before. I still go out and chase in May and June. I physically go out there and stay like I used to. I have a small group of chasers who go with me. Great guys. We all get along and have a great time. I'm not as aggressive as I used to be, because I don't have to be. The photography market's not there, which is a great thing. I don't have to worry about the self-promotion. People always look back and say, geez, Warren Faidley, you were crazy back then with your promotions and trying, but people don't realize you have to do that stuff to make a living. And there's outside forces trying to get you to do that too. I absolutely hate that. I hate the self-promotion. I hate all of that, but you still have to do it to make a living. So now I don't have to be as aggressive as before. I can relax and have a lot more fun. I don't have to drive for 20 hours straight to get to a location. I can relax a little bit, but I'm still doing photography. I'm still going out, do a lot of public safety. I'm going to be doing a lot more of these types of talks. I am an EMT. I'm a tactical EMT, so I still volunteer when I go out. I love teaching EMT to storm chasers, those kind of emergency medical situations, because it's a little different than everyday first aid. There's a little more complications when you have these mass casualty events. So I love doing that, and basically just having a lot more fun, I think, than I used to. I know there's a lot of chasers on social media that are going, 200 miles an hour, their hair on fire, trying to get to every single storm. And it will wear you out. After a lot of years, it's been my 35th year of doing this, you do have to occasionally stop a little bit and enjoy what you're doing.
I hear you. I hear you. Absolutely. Now, the last thing I'll ask you is, if I recall correctly, you may have to correct me, but I mentioned Twister, and I believe you were able to go to the premiere of that, or I guess a premiere event. And I believe that on the anniversary recently, you put out a formal apology for kind of making fun of some of the special effects there of the not quite so realistic hail.
Yeah.
So I just got to ask, what was it, for one, what was it like being at the premiere of that? And then two, just say that I appreciate that I'm not the only one that would actually do that. We actually had a screening of Twister several months ago for Ellis County Weather followers. It was a great event, and I'm glad I was kind of sitting a little bit away from everyone so that they couldn't hear me nitpicking every little thing, looking at the screen and the National Severe Storms Lab going, that doesn't mean anything, or the different little, obviously the little nitpicks you can use to do that. So what was it like to be involved in that project?
It was absolutely a wonderful experience. The original script, I'll tell you this real quick, the original script by Warner Brothers, they sent Peter Iliff out, who wrote Patriot Games and some other films. And we spent a lot of time together, and they were developing a script which I thought was more chaser oriented. It was a little bit less of the romance and the other things, and it looked like a fun script. Well, long story short, or the other way around, Steven Spielberg got involved in it, and they bought the rights. Universal basically took over, and they went with, I believe, Crichton's book, and everything changed then. And I decided, kind of limit my involvement, but they still used me as a technical consultant for things and props, but I did not consult on any of the screwy stuff. That was somebody else with that. But it was a lot of fun. I mean, Bill Paxton was a great guy to meet him a couple of times, and yeah, there were some screwy things, and I was in the screening with the watching the hail chips were ice cubes or whatever, and I remember laughing, and somebody hit me on the side from the Weather Channel and said, "Hey, don't do that.
Awesome.
The director and everybody's sitting right behind you. You better stop doing that." And I had to control myself. So it was fun. I mean, getting the shot on the CD cover and the poster was definitely one of the highlights of my career. And I mean, you talk about bragging rights. I don't know how you top that. That was really cool. So it was a fun time, and who knows, maybe someday there'll be another movie come along, and it would just be a lot of fun to do that again.
I wouldn't argue with that one bit. Now, you obviously don't like the self-promotion and that kind of thing, but if you would just tell the folks viewing this, how can they see some of your work? How can they get in touch with what you do? If they do want to get one of those prints or that kind of thing, how can they best find you?
Well, the best way is to go to stormchaser.com. That's my domain name, and all the links to social. Who would guess? All the social media links are for Facebook and Twitter. I am on Twitter a lot nowadays. Still on Facebook. Again, it's good to be able to share some of the things I've done over the years on social media. So yeah, stormchaser.com, go there. There's pictures, all the stuff we've been talking about, and a lot more stuff on there.
I love that you legit have stormchaser.com. I mean, if that doesn't scream like I am the OG, I don't know what does. I mean, that's just greatness.
I was real lucky. Part of my investment back then was buying domain names, and I bought a lot of other names that made quite a bit of money. I mean, it was a great investment. You could buy a name for $75 that would sell for $20, $30, $40, $50,000.
Wow.
And I remember writing in stormchaser.com and it said available. And my hands were like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I got to get that. And I'm thinking, okay, I've got to get Hurricane Chaser to hurricanechaser.com. So I got a lot of those names back in there's a lot I wish I would have gotten, but yeah, it was great. And I'm going to try to keep it. I've told my wife I want her to keep it forever and ever after I'm long gone, and just as kind of a little, I don't know what you would call it, the Museum of Warren or something, put the images up there and the stories and everything.
That sounds great. Well, Mr. Faidley, thank you so much for talking to me. To me, I'm a little guy talking to a giant. So
oh no,
it's a pleasure talking to you. And this is part of a Wild Weather Wednesday series where I'm talking to different storm chasers or different people in different parts of kind of the weather industry and ecosystem, and also telling some stories too. So I might hit you up again to talk about Hurricane Andrew. I have some recollection of you talking about being in a parking garage and video of you doing everything you can to hold on to gravity against that storm's might. So when I do the Andrew episode, I might just see if you can come back and specifically talk about that experience, because I have gotten a healthy but realistic respect for tornadoes where I can see one and stay calm. But when there's a hurricane barreling towards me, I'm just, hurricanes and earthquakes, I think, are the two things that I just am okay not experiencing personally, because that's just power that I can't even imagine.
Yeah, hurricanes it's all about where you stay, if it's going to survive. That's the big thing about hurricanes. There's not like a tornado where you're mobile. With a hurricane, you're planted there, and wherever you've chosen has to survive, especially the storm surge. The wind's so much worried about, but the storm surge, because I like to work right on the beach in the water as close as I can get. That's my thing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And everybody go to stormchaser.com, number one, so you can say you did, to see Warren Faidley's work.
Great. Thank you very much. I had a great time.
Thank you.
Take care.